Hi YouTube, Doom here. It's been a bit since I've talked about difficulty in Helldivers, and I want to share some of my personal experiences with how I've felt about difficulty, talk a little bit about how the community feels about difficulty, and really get into what I want from the game and what the community expects from the game. So I suppose you'd start off with a little bit of a backstory. I mean, I'm not a perfect gamer. I am not going to be posting any solo, no damage runs of Helldivers, but I enjoyed Helldivers 1's higher difficulties where there was a difficulty setting high enough to be literally impossible. Difficulty 13, 14, 15 with a group could be absolute chaos and complete death. And I loved it. I loved that that option was there. You didn't have to play it, but it was there. So when Helldivers 2 came around, the first thing I noticed changes from Helldivers 1 was in the first game, if everyone died, if you had a squad wipe, it was mission fail. I noticed there was a reinforced counter, and I thought, it's kind of casual approach to how things are going to be in Helldivers 2, and I was a little bit nervous. I thought, okay, maybe the game will be too easy. The game finally came out. We were all new. We were all fresh. We didn't know exactly what we were doing. Bots were extremely tough. Bugs were still extremely tough. The Illuminate didn't exist. Bile Titans were absolute menaces that couldn't be really damaged by things like, raw damage from the HMG or AMR. You had to get underneath them. Helldive was overtuned with, 8 to 10 Bile Titans on your screen. There was a lot of balance tweaks that had to happen even before the 60-day plan. The game was almost impossible at times on max difficulty. Now, that left players with a sense of helplessness and that their equipment was too weak at a lot of points. So the 60-day plan came around, I think, shortly after or around the Super Helldive was introduced. Now, I liked things before the 60-day plan. I liked the difficulty. I loved the difficulty on bots. I liked losing more missions than, most people would. I feel like the win rates for mission completion is extremely high in Helldivers 2, and it's something that people should take a note of while they're playing the game. Is the game is really designed to be able to do your work for Super Earth regardless of death, mission completed, and somewhere around 80 to 90% of missions are a success. And the stakes for failing are slightly higher in Helldivers 2 if you're trying to progress, because when you fail a mission, you fail the whole operation, and you're not rewarded the medals. So they keep the win rates and success rates pretty high. After the 60-day plan, it was a complete revamp of a lot of underused weapons, stratagems, changes to penetration, enemy damage values. It was all over the place. And it was widely praised because more equipment was viable, more equipment was usable, the game was more fun for most people. And it is a casual extraction shooter, and that did well for the game. It helped the game grow, and it was a boon. It was the right choice. Cleaning up the game's balance was a correct choice. Fast forward to things like the Illuminate coming out and bringing things like Leviathans and Harvesters and Flesh Mobs into the picture. And there's complaints of difficulty of Flesh Mobs because they don't really have a weak point. They're the first Bullet Sponge enemy. Same with Leviathans. They weren't destructible. Flesh Mobs and Leviathans weren't destructible like the other enemies on the bug and the bot fronts. They were just Bullet Sponges. Flesh Mobs didn't get tweaked as much, but Leviathans were at least made so their auto-aim cannons weren't instantly obliterating you, and you could actually destroy those cannons that were shooting at you and they had spotlights added to them. Now, it goes into a discussion on, is something counterable? Is it fun? Is it balanced? And I've always frowned upon game design that this is the term that I coined. Is if you exist, you die. That kind of gameplay feels like there's no counter. It's if you're there, you are dead. There was nothing you could do about it. Things that would fall sort of into that were like Leviathan's 1.0. If you were in open airspace and a Leviathan existed somewhere and you hadn't already started engaging it, it would shoot you. You'd have no spotlight. You'd instantly have your mech one shot or your Helldiver killed in one shot. That wasn't great gameplay, so they tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and changed it so Leviathans are now big bullet sponges that can still do that from time to time, but are not immediately annihilating you every single time. So now we've got, three factions of the game. We've got war bonds rolling in. We start getting things like weapon customization, and I feel like this was another, power to the players moment where there's all these options and trade-offs for all your weapons. And I felt like the game was in its easiest point. This is where I was like, the game it's easy. I'm not as challenged. Super Helldives aren't that difficult, and I feel like I could go in with a lot of loadout randomizers or meme loadouts, and that's the kind of videos I was making for the most part. It was raw gameplay and meme loadouts, because you could get away with it on most fronts. They started upping the ante, at some point with the Predator strain, which was the first time where, like, you have to take different equipment because Predator Stalkers needed to be eliminated quickly. But there's lots of options because they don't really have... The counter is killing them. The counter is killing them or disabling them before they get to you. So Predator Strain wasn't really... What's the word for it? Lashed out against community in terms of difficulty. It was just a, wow, that's really tough. But they were counterable. So now we get into the unjust. And this update blew me away. So first off, I know there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of audio performance issues with the game. That is something I'm not really trying to cover in this discussion stuff. But this update came out. I was blown away by the Rupture strain, Dragon Roaches, and Hive Lords in the caves. I loved the difficulty of it. It required different equipment for the Hive Lord. It required different equipment for the Dragon Roach. It required different equipment for the Rupture strain. Now, at first, we were bouncing between Hive Lords and Dragon Roaches, and eventually they just turned Osha Une into a meat grinder with all of them there. And as this was going on, I'm noticing the Rupture Warriors, how strong they are at killing me as the host. Now, conversations start emerging between people in the Helldivers community of, wait, this is a host-centric problem where the hosts are being annihilated and the other people are dodging the attacks. So I think, okay, makes sense. They'll probably fix that because regardless of how difficult the Rupture strain is supposed to be, it's unfair for the host to be targeted differently than the other players in the game. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. And that seems what they leaned into. Now, people started to, really not like the Rupture Warriors and what they did. And it's the arguments against them that I've heard a lot is there isn't a counter. It's if you exist, you get hit. If you exist, you get slashed and you die. So not only are you at a point where you have to deal with these little buggers, but you're also paying a stim tax, and if you don't bring specific equipment, you have no counter. Now, I really think that this could have been an easy tweak. I think this is something that, you could have just changed by just changing the unburrow mechanics. Shoot some bullets at the Rupture Warriors and let them emerge. Just make it take more bullets than an explosive weapon. But I'm not in game dev. I don't know how long these things take to fix. Arrowhead wants to look at this for a longer period of time. So they just go and remove the Rupture strain. Just get rid of it. For 5 weeks, we are going to be Rupture strainless. So what I'm feeling here is there's a lot of outcry about unfair difficulty. That's why Leviathans were cried out about. That's why Rupture Warriors were cried out about. They feel like it's unfair. And there's videos of Rupture strain warriors jumping on the ground, hitting a guy with a jump pack, and wasting him. But what I don't want people to be adverse to is difficulty itself. And I don't think the community's totally adverse to difficulty itself, because they enjoyed the Hive Lords. People wanted to go fight them. People wanted to deal with them. They wanted to fight that boss. They don't like unfair difficulty, where they feel like there's no counter, like Dragon Roaches having, perfect tracking, or not following the base mechanics of the game, which I would argue is destructibility. So if you've got a Dragon Roach with 2 wings, and you bring both wings to 0 HP, you would think it would fall out of the sky, because that's kind of how most enemies work in the game. You rip off their limbs, you rip off their arms, you rip off their guns, and if it's mechanical, you can blow it up. But with all the fleshy-based enemies, you can mostly damage parts of them. There's some part of them you can damage to do a lot of bonus damage. And Dragon Roaches just had the sacks underneath like a Bile Titan, but unfortunately are so similar to Bile Titans that their wings, aka legs, are completely invulnerable to significant disabling. So it's been a journey on difficulty, and I really want the game to be... I want it to be harder. I really liked Into the Unjust. It was my favorite update. My channel's exploding from this update, and also my passion for the game. I would love to see more difficulty in Helldivers. And I talked about this last time in a video about Super Helldive and higher level difficulties. Some of the points that I made back then were there's a space in the game and in the game design for alternate strains, alternate enemy types, alternate challenge areas, and Arrowhead went exactly followed through with exactly the kind of stuff I was talking about. They made Gloom areas that you didn't have to go participate in the Gloom. You can still play the game anywhere you want. You can go fight Illuminate right now. People are off on, New Alexandria right now capturing things. They made new areas, they made new strains, they made new bosses, and these are, yes, they're part of the major order, and yes, you want to help with the major order if you want to get more medals progress, but you don't have to. You can go fight bots the whole time. There's people that stay on the bot front the whole time. Uh, I think moving forward, strains and new difficulties and new bosses and specialized areas like the Gloom or specialized areas of higher threat are perfect for the game design because you can go play the game on level 3 and go farm your super credits, or you can play the game on difficulty 10 versus bots while it's a bug order, or you can go into difficulty 10 and fight a Hive Lord because that's what you want to do. It is choose your own difficulty, and I think the only reason Rupture Warriors got so much flack was because instead of being a big enemy that you need to deal with, a large threat like a Bile Titan or a Factory Strider, where it's obvious there's a counter, there's a counter or multiple counters to deal with it that you bring because it's a large enemy and it's a large threat. So you bring to make sure you bring anti-tank to kill the Bile Titan, to kill the Factory Strider. These are chaff enemies. So chaff enemies are going to be different because most of them can be dispatched with light pen in some way, shape, or form. There aren't very many that are completely immune to light pen. They have weak points. Hive guards have weak points. Overseers can be shot in the chest. Devastators can be shot in the face or in the waist. Things like that. Light pen works. Light pen still works in these guys. They don't have a lot of health. But the fact that you can't do anything, there's no counter while it's burrowing to you if you have light pen or a medium pen rifle. If you don't have something that can immediately be explosive, there's no counter. So hopefully, Arrowhead, when you see this in the future, just make it so that people can respond to this. Give them something to counter this when they see it coming straight at them. That would give people more options, and the simplest option is if you shoot at the ground while it's moving the ground, it pokes its head out to go, why am I being shot at? What's happening up here? Because you would think an underground enemy feeling a bunch of stuff above it would respond to like, oh, there's a person underneath me. So I want to see you guys not be so adverse to difficulty. I know there was a lot of flack about these guys. I don't think they were bad. I don't think they were that hard to counter. Yes, it did shoehorn your loadouts, but the fix is very simple. Just give more player agency. Players do not like to feel like they're in a sense of helplessness, and that's what Leviathans 1.0 was. That's what Rupture Warriors are when they're burrowing at you. That's what it was in the early game, but when anti-tank was the only option to damage a Bile Titan or a Charger, and you had, such limited options. It's one of those things. Things that vastly limit your loadout options are frowned upon unless it's a large enemy, because there's lots of anti-tank options that make sense on large enemies. With chaff enemies, you're telling people you can't use half the primaries in the game because you can't force this thing to unburrow. The simplest fix is let us make these things unburrow when they come at us. They're just a chaff enemy. They don't have a lot of health. If you don't notice them and you don't respond to them and you don't shoot them coming up at you, then yes, you should get hit. You should get sliced and diced. But if you see it coming, you should be able to do something about it. So peace out, guys. Hopefully we see some big difficulty tweaks and changes in the future. I'm excited for any sort of big enemies, big bosses, or big threats or increased difficulty that Arrowhead adds to the game. I feel like I'm a little bit against the grain here in terms of difficulties. I really want this game to be more challenging than it is. I would like to see a lower win rate. I would like to see difficulty 10 or any future difficulties be absolutely a meat grinder and a struggle, because that's where I have the most fun with this game. And that's why I have really enjoyed Into the Unjust and will continue to enjoy any new difficult content Arrowhead makes. So, peace out, YouTube. It's been great.